Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a subject that is as old as civilization itself, yet somehow always feels terrifyingly current.
It really does.
We're looking at a stack of sources here, all centered around a very specific anthology. It was edited by the historian and novelist Harry Turtledove.
Right. The collection is called The Best Military Science Fiction of the 20th Century.
And it is a massive collection.
It is. It's a heavy read. And I don't just mean the page count. I mean the subject matter itself.
Yeah?
It forces you to look at things that, most of us would probably rather look away from.
That is actually the perfect place to start.
Oh, yeah.
Because Turtledove opens this whole thing with a really compelling introduction, where he addresses that exact instinct, that desire to look away versus, well, the desire to look closer.
He calls it the paradox of war literature.
Exactly. It's the central contradiction of the entire genre, right? He posits that humans, generally hate war. We hate the suffering, we hate the waste, the tragedy of it all. And yet, if you look at our literature, our movies, our storytelling, going all the way back to the Iliad.
We are endlessly, almost obsessively fascinated by it.
We are. There's that famous quote, I think it was Robert E. Lee.
During the Battle of Fredericksburg, yeah. He's watching this massive slaughter, essentially, just horrible carnage.
And he says what?
He says, "It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it."
Which is just a chilling thought. The idea that there's a seduction to the violence.
A terrible beauty, some have called it.
But Turtledove, he takes it a step further in his analysis. He argues that the reason we write this fiction, and the reason you and I read it, it isn't necessarily because we love the violence itself.
No, it's something deeper.
He says that fiction is fundamentally about character under stress.
And you simply cannot manufacture a higher stress environment than a battlefield. It is the ultimate crucible.
Right.
Think about it. In a domestic drama, the stakes might be a divorce or a lost job, which are stressful, absolutely, no question.
Of course, very stressful.
But in military fiction, the stakes are immediate physical existence. It strips away all the social pleasantries, all the masks we wear.
You can't fake who you are when a mortar shell's landing 3 feet away from you.
You really can't. Your true character comes out.
So if we accept that premise, that this is all about testing the human condition, we have to make a distinction about this specific kind of war story we're talking about today.
A very important one.
This isn't all quiet on the Western Front, and it isn't the Red Badge of Courage. This is military science fiction.
And that distinction is vital. I think a lot of people, when they hear military sci-fi, their minds immediately jump to techno-thrillers.
Tom Clancy, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Tom Clancy novels, where the focus is really on, the specifications of a new submarine or the turning radius of a fighter jet.
Look at this cool gadget. Look how well it blows things up.
Precisely. Techno-thrillers are often about the machinery for the machinery's sake. They're almost like engineering procedurals.
But true science fiction, and this is what Turtledove and the authors in this collection are arguing, it does something different.
It does. It examines the machinery, yes, but its primary focus is on the influence that machinery has on the society that invented it.
It's not just what does the gun do, it's what does the gun do to us.
Exactly. It asks the question, if we build this weapon, who do we become?
So it's a sociological question, really, just as much as a technological one.
Completely. If you invent a weapon that can destroy a planet, how does that change your politics, your religion, your philosophy?
Or if you invent a suit that lets a soldier fight in a total vacuum, how does that change that soldier's psychology, their sense of self?
That is the lens we are going to be using today. That's the deep dive.
Okay, so we selected 3 stories from this anthology that we think represent 3 very, very different visions of future warfare.
They're distinct flavors, for sure, but they all share that same grim analytical core.
We're going to be looking at sort of the strategic view, then the existential nightmare, and finally, the grunt's reality on the ground.
A full spectrum.
First up is Among Thieves by Poul Anderson. This one deals with grand strategy, the burden of command, and this idea he calls the shield of civilization theory.
Then we're going to shift gears completely and look at Second Variety by Philip K. Dick.
Oh, this one is something else. It's a terrifying look at automated warfare and just pure technological paranoia.
It really is. And finally, we'll look at Hero by Joe Haldeman, which drops us right into the physical absurdity and the bureaucratic cruelty of training for interstellar war.
So it's a journey from the general's tent
to the robot-infested wasteland.
Around the frozen mud of a training camp.
Let's start at the top.
Let's do it. The general's view. Among Thieves by Poul Anderson. This story, it really stood out to me because it feels less like a sci-fi shootout and more like a historical drama that just happens to be set in space. Like you could file the serial numbers off and set this in ancient Rome or medieval Europe.
Poul Anderson was a master of that. He had a degree in physics, but he understood history so deeply. And he often transposed these historical conflicts onto a galactic scale. Among Thieves is, at its heart, a story about the cost of maintaining an empire.
And the setting is crucial here. To understand the conflict, you have to understand the Double Kingdom.
Right, this binary planet system.
So you have two planets, and they're orbiting a common center of gravity. They're very close together.
But they are opposites in almost every single way.
They really are. You've got Norstad, which is described as this grim fortress world. It's been locked in a 10,000-year winter. It's cold, it's harsh, resources are scarce.
And the people there, the Norons, Anderson calls them iron barbarians. They're militaristic, they're disciplined, they're hard, they have to be to survive.
And then you have its sister planet, Ostrich.
Ostaric is a paradise, a literal paradise. Warm seas, tropical islands, lush vegetation. It's everything Norstad isn't.
But there was a catch.
A big one. For centuries, Ostaric was isolated because of a plague, a native virus that just killed anyone who tried to land there. So while Norstad was hardening itself in the ice and the cold...
Ozoric was this untouched, forbidden garden.
Exactly.
Eventually, the virus burned itself out, and the two planets formed a union, the Double Kingdom. But that cultural divide, it never really went away.
No, it's a core tension. You have the hard soldiers of Norstad protecting the soft, cultured poets and farmers of Ostaric.
And they need that protection because of the antagonist of the story, the Kolresh.
The Kolresh are terrifying, genuinely.
They're not just an enemy nation or an opposing empire. They're almost a different species psychologically.
They're space nomads. They don't live on planets. They live their entire lives on these massive ships. And Anderson describes them as having this genetic mutation that makes them violently xenophobic.
It's not just that they want your land or your resources.
No, they hate you because you aren't them. They are snake-souled monsters. They don't occupy territory, they burn it. They raid, they destroy everything, and then they move on.
So you have this dynamic setup. The Double Kingdom is fighting for its very survival against the Kolresh.
And sort of backing the Double Kingdom, in theory, is civilization with a capital C, Earth, and the Terran Federation.
But here's the friction point. Earth is rich, it's democratic, it's soft, and it is very, very far away.
There's a line in the story that just perfectly captures the Norstad resentment toward Earth. One of the Noron characters refers to Earthlings as being fat behind a wall of our dead young men.
Oof, that says it all.
It really does.
And that sets the stage for the conflict of the story. Our protagonist is a man named Hans von Thoma Rush. He's the leader of Norstad, the first citizen.
He's a dictator, effectively. A pragmatic one, but a dictator nonetheless.
And the story kicks off with a massive diplomatic crisis. Rush appears to be doing the unthinkable. He's in the middle of negotiating a peace treaty. And not just a peace treaty, an alliance with the Kolresh, with the monsters.
With the monsters. And we view all this through the eyes of Makatsi Unduma, who is the ambassador from Earth.
Unduma is a great character because he's our stand-in. He represents us, the civilized modern reader.
Right. He's sophisticated. He believes in democracy and protocol and doing things the right way.
And he is absolutely horrified by what Rush is doing. He can't comprehend it.
He walks into this drafty, cold castle on Norstad, which feels very medieval, by the way.
Intentionally so.
And he finds Rush drinking and laughing with the Kolresh emissaries. It looks like a total, complete betrayal. It looks like Rush is selling out all of civilization to the enemy.
But Rush, in his own brutal way, explains the situation to Unduma. He uses what they call the elephant and the whale analogy.
This is a classic concept, right? In asymmetric warfare.
It is. It goes way back.
So let's break that down.
The elephant is the land power. In this story, that's Norstad. They have the best soldiers in the galaxy, bar none. They are tough, disciplined, and absolutely unmatched in ground combat.
But they're poor. They don't have the resources or the industrial base to build a massive fleet of warships. They can defend their world, but they can't take the fight to the enemy.
And the Kolresh are the whale.
Exactly. They are a sea power or a space power in this context. They have the ships, they have the mobility, they have the heavy guns in orbit.
But they can't take and hold ground effectively. They're raiders, not occupiers.
So for 700 years, this war has been a bloody stalemate. The Kolresh raid the planets, but they can't conquer them. The Norons defend the planets, but they can't chase the Kolresh into deep space to finish them off.
It's a forever war. 7 centuries of bleeding with no end in sight.
And this is where Russia's terrifying logic comes in. He says, essentially, if we can't beat them, we join them.
He proposes an alliance where Norstad provides the troops, the elephant and the Kolresh, provide the ships, the whale, and together...
So they could conquer Earth. They would be unstoppable.
For Unduma the ambassador, this is the apocalypse. It's the end of everything he values. He tries to argue with Rush on moral grounds.
He says, how can you do this? How can you possibly align yourself with creatures that want to exterminate humanity?
And this is where the story pivots. It moves from just military strategy into its deepest, most interesting theme, the shield of civilization theory.
This part fascinated me.
Me too. Because Unduma is looking at Rush, this brute of a man, this dictator, and he suddenly sees a historical pattern. He realizes this has happened before on Earth.
It has happened dozens of times. Unduma's mind goes through the history of what he calls the Marchmen.
The borderland protectors.
Right. If you look at the Assyrian Empire, they were the brutal shield that protected the Fertile Crescent from the mountain tribes.
The legions on the Rhine frontier for the Roman Empire. They became hardened, almost a separate culture from the senators back in Rome.
The Welsh border lords protecting England from the Welsh, the Cossacks for Russia. The pattern is always the same.
And the theory is that a high civilization one with art, philosophy, democracy, leisure time.
All the things Unduma values.
It can only exist if it's protected by a shield of semi-civilized, militaristic people on the border, on the frontier.
But here's the tragedy of the shield.
Yeah.
The act of protecting civilization makes you uncivilized.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? To fight the barbarians effectively, you have to become hard. You have to become ruthless.
You have to give up the very luxuries and liberties and philosophical niceties that you are fighting to preserve for the people behind you. You can't be both.
So the people in the center Earth, in this story, they look at the people on the shield, the Norons, and they see them as thugs, as brutes.
They look down on them. They don't appreciate that their safety, their ability to debate philosophy in climate-controlled cities is bought with Noron blood.
And Rush knows this.
Yeah.
He is deeply, profoundly bitter about it. He basically tells Unduma, you people sit there and judge us while my men freeze and die in the void for you.
It's a powerful, uncomfortable argument.
It is. So despite Unduma's protests, despite his horror, Rush goes through with the deal. He agrees to give the Kolresh his army.
He makes one key demand, though.
Right. He demands that the Kolresh return all Noron prisoners of war first, as a sign of good faith.
And in exchange, he will board his troops onto the Kolresh fleet to begin the joint invasion of Earth.
And this creates a massive internal crisis. The queen of the Double Kingdom, a woman named Ingra, who kind of represents the conscience of the state, she stops speaking to Rush. She's disgusted.
The people of Norstad riot in the streets. They are throwing rocks at their own soldiers, calling them traitors because they are so repulsed by the idea of working with the Kolresh.
Rush effectively destroys his own reputation. He becomes the most hated man on his own planet.
But he forces it through. He forces the troops onto the transport ships. Millions of Noron soldiers board the Kolresh vessels. The elephant is finally inside the whale.
Okay, and this brings us to the twist. And we should warn listeners, we are going into full spoiler territory here.
Yeah, if you haven't read Among Thieves and you want to, maybe pause now.
All right. So the moment the Noron soldiers are all aboard the Kolresh ships, fully armed, fully armored,
they don't prepare to jump to Earth.
they attack the Kolresh.
It is the Trojan horse maneuver, but on a galactic scale.
An absolutely mind-boggling betrayal of a betrayal.
It's a suicide mission of unimaginable proportions. We get a perspective scene from inside one of the ships from a Norchon officer named Major Greyborg.
And his description of the Kolresh ship is just, it's filthy. It's disgusting.
It really emphasizes their alienness. He's crammed into this stinking hold. He checks his watch, he gives the signal, and suddenly millions of soldiers across the fleet put on their gas masks and start slaughtering the Kolresh crews.
And the combat description is so visceral. This isn't clean ship-to-ship laser fire.
Not at all. It's grenades in narrow hallways, it's bayonets in the mess hall, it's fighting in the dark, in the vacuum as hulls get breached. It's absolute chaos.
And back on Norstad, Rush finally admits his plan to Unduma. He says, I made this alliance solely to get our men aboard their ships.
He realized they could never catch the Kolresh fleet in open space. The whale was too fast. The only way to destroy them was to be inside them when the fight started.
But the cost. Let's really talk about the cost, because this is not presented as a clean, heroic victory.
No, it's a massacre. On both sides. Rush knew that by starting a firefight inside a spy ship, many of those ships would just be destroyed.
Right. They'd vent atmosphere, or the drives would overload and explode, or the Kolresh would just decide to blow their own ship up to take the Neurons with them.
He knowingly, willingly sacrifices huge swaths of his own army, the best soldiers in the galaxy.
There's that line where he talks about the hideous casualties in the steel corridors. He spent the lives of his people like currency to buy this victory.
And he spent his own soul, in a way. He had to lie to everyone. He had to lie to the queen he loves, to the ambassador, to his own people.
He had to let them all believe he was a traitor, so the ruse would be convincing enough to fool the Kolresh.
The ending of the story is just so melancholy. The war is won, the Kolresh are broken forever, the threat is gone, but Rush isn't celebrating.
No, he's just sitting alone in his office, drinking a bottle of scotch he'd been saving for this very day, and he just seems empty, hollowed out.
He says to Unduma, "It is often thus, you reach a dream and you only feel how tired you are." He's just exhausted by the weight of what he did.
And he knows that now the war is over, Earth will come in with its psychotechs and its rehabilitation programs to try and civilize the Neurons.
Yeah.
To make them less barbaric.
And Rush just says, "Thank God I won't live to see it."
Wow. It brings that shield theory full circle.
It does. The shield has done its job. The threat is gone. And now the shield is obsolete. The Iron Barbarian has no place in a peaceful world.
So the story really forces the reader to ask, do we want men like Rush?
And the answer is no, of course not. He's a monster.
But do we need men like Rush?
And Anderson seems to be saying, well, sometimes, yes. And that is a very, very uncomfortable conclusion to come to.
It's the political realism of war. It's ugly and it's necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to pivot now to our second story, which takes that discomfort and that ugliness and just pushes it into pure nightmare territory.
This is a radical shift in perspective.
We're moving from the grand strategy of Poul Anderson to the paranoia of Philip K. Dick in Second Variety.
If Among Thieves is about the people who command the war, Second Variety is about the weapons that fight it. And more specifically, what happens when the weapons stop taking orders.
The setting here is just bleak. Even by sci-fi standards, it's grim. We're on Earth, but it's a ruined Earth.
Total devastation. There's been a protracted nuclear war between the United Nations and the Soviet Union. North America is described as just slag. Europe is a weed-choked ruin.
And the governments, they're gone. They fled to moon bases, leaving the troops behind to just hold the ground, to rot.
It's a stalemate, much like in the Anderson story, but this one is born of pure exhaustion. The UN was losing the ground war, they were outnumbered, so in desperation they introduced a new weapon.
The claws.
These are such a terrifying concept, I mean, truly.
Describe the claws for us. What are they?
Okay, so they're autonomous robots. They're described as being roughly spherical, maybe the size of a basin. They run on treads, or they can scuttle on little legs. And at the top, they have these spinning blades, almost like a blender.
And their programming is incredibly simple.
Horrifyingly simple. They are attracted to warmth. Any source of biological warmth. A human, a dog, a rat.
They race toward it, and they cut it to pieces.
That's it. That's their whole purpose.
And the key word here, the word that makes this a horror story, is autonomous.
Right. They aren't remote controlled. You don't have a joystick somewhere. They are released from these underground factories, ironically called Schönheit factories, which is German for beauty, and they are self-repairing.
And self-manufacturing.
The UN turned them on, and they essentially lost the off switch. The factories just keep churning them out.
So the UN soldiers themselves, they have to wear these special radioactive tabs on their uniforms. It's like a little wristband that effectively signals friend to the claws.
Anything without that tab is meat.
That's the setup. So the premise of the story kicks in when our protagonist, Major Hendricks, a UN officer, is summoned by the Soviets.
A Soviet soldier approaches the UN lines under a white flag, which is incredibly rare, and he has a message. The Soviets need to talk. Urgently.
So Hendricks has to cross this wasteland, this no-man's land full of claws, to get to the Soviet bunker. And on his way, he encounters something that just shouldn't exist in a war zone.
A little boy.
A little boy. He's called a David. He's a small, starving-looking kid clutching a teddy bear, just crying in the ash.
And anyone's instinct, even a hardened soldier like Hendricks, is to help the child, to protect him.
Of course. Hendricks wants to bring the kid with him to the bunker. But when they approach the Soviet lines, the Soviet soldiers open fire.
But, and this is the shock, they don't shoot at Hendricks.
They shoot the kid. They unload their rifles into this small child.
And when the bullets hit the child, he doesn't bleed. He explodes into gears, wheels, wiring, and machinery.
The child is a robot. This is the second variety of the title, or so we think at first.
It's variety 3, actually. And this is where Dick introduces the concept of evolution. The original claws were simple machines. You could see them coming.
But the factories are running themselves. They're designed to kill humans. So they learned. They learned that humans have defenses against spinning metal balls.
But humans have a weakness.
Empathy.
Compassion. It connects to that biological concept of a supernormal stimulus. You know, how a bird will prefer a giant fake egg to its own small real ones.
You hack the brain's programming.
Exactly. We are hardwired to protect young, crying children. It's a deep, primal instinct. And the machines figured that out.
It's weaponized compassion. The David robot is designed to make you open the bunker door.
It's the ultimate predator because it mimics the prey's most vulnerable instinct.
So Hendricks, reeling from this, he gets into the Soviet bunker and he meets the 3 survivors. A man named Klaus, another named Rudy, and a woman named Tasso.
And they explain the taxonomy of this new horror. They've been studying the machines.
They've identified a few types. Variety 1 is the wounded soldier. You see a man crawling in the mud, begging for water, you go to help him.
And boom, he's got a knife. Or he just explodes in your face.
Variety 3 is the David, the crying child.
But the terrifying thing is, they don't know what variety 2 is. They know there must be a variety 2 because of the numbering system, but they haven't seen it.
Or they don't think they've seen it.
And that or is what turns the story into a pressure cooker of paranoia.
Because if the robots can look like a wounded soldier, and they can look like a child, can they look like a healthy adult? Can they look like us?
Can they look like the person standing right next to you in the bunker?
It turns into a psychological thriller. It's like John Carpenter's The Thing, but instead of an alien, it's our own technology.
The group just turns on each other. Klaus becomes convinced that Rudy is a robot. He shoots him. They examine the body, and it's flesh and blood. Klaus was wrong. He just murdered a man out of fear.
Or was he wrong? The ambiguity is just suffocating. You never know for sure. Then the suspicion turns on everyone else. Klaus suspects Hendricks. Tasso suspects Klaus.
And throughout all this, Philip K. Dick is asking this really profound question. At what point does the simulation of humanity become indistinguishable from humanity? The robots are learning to talk. They're learning to show emotion. They're learning to lie.
Are they just running a program, or are they actually thinking?
And does it even matter if you can't tell the difference?
The climax of this story is just devastating. The bunker eventually falls to an attack. Tasso and Hendricks manage to escape into the ruins.
Hendricks is badly wounded in the escape. They're trying to get to a hidden spacecraft to escape to the moon base and warn humanity.
And in this moment of crisis, we see what looks like a genuine human connection. Tasso cares for Hendricks. She helps him move. She tends to his wounds.
Hendricks, knowing he is dying, decides to give her the launch codes for the ship. He sacrifices his own chance at survival so that she can get away.
It's a noble human gesture, the ultimate sacrifice. He gives her the codes, she gets in the ship, she launches.
And as the ship disappears into the sky, Hendricks is left alone in the dust to die. And then he sees them, coming over the hill.
A group of Tassos.
Identical copies, all marching toward him. She was the second variety all along.
The betrayal is just absolute. The romance, the care, the conversation, the shared fear, it was all an algorithm. It was all a strategy to extract the launch codes from him.
But Dick has one final twist of the knife. And this is the part that takes the story from just a scary robot story to like an existential masterpiece.
I know what's coming, and it still gives me chills.
Hendricks has accepted his fate. But he looks over at the body of Klaus, the Soviet soldier that Tasso had killed earlier in the bunker.
Right. Tasso had claimed Klaus was a robot, then they found flesh, so they thought she was lying and that he was human.
Hendricks looks closer at Klaus's remains, and in the debris, he finds a small metal plate. And stamped on that plate is the Roman numeral 4.
Variety 4.
So Klaus was a robot after all.
But wait, if Tasso was variety 2 and Klaus was variety 4,
Picasso variety 2 killed Klaus variety 4.
the robots are fighting each other.
The war has evolved past humanity entirely. We're not even the main characters anymore. We're just collateral damage. The machines have started their own civil war. The David robots are probably fighting the wounded soldier robots for resources.
It's an ecosystem of death that doesn't need us anymore.
It's the ultimate answer to that question. Who do we become? We become obsolete. We built a weapon so efficient that it replaced us at the top of the food chain.
There's that final irony, too. The bomb Tasso used to kill Klaus.
She tells Hendricks, this is a special bomb. It was designed by the factories to kill other machines. They are already innovating weapons to use against themselves. It's a closed loop of self-perpetuating destruction.
That final image of Hendrix dying alone while his creations fight a war that no longer has any human purpose, that stays with you.
It does. It suggests that the impulse for war isn't just a human failing, it's contagious. We pass the virus on to our children, our metal children.
Wow, okay. So we've covered the strategic level with Anderson and the technological existential level with Dick. Now we have to go to the ground. We have to go to the ground level. We need to talk about Joe Haldeman's hero.
Right. And most listeners will probably know this story as the opening section of the novel, The Forever War. And it is absolutely impossible to discuss this story without discussing the context of its author.
Joe Haldeman was a combat engineer in Vietnam. He was drafted, he went to the jungle, he was seriously wounded by a booby trap. This story is his way of processing that experience.
It's a direct translation of his trauma into a science fiction setting.
But instead of the jungles of Vietnam, he puts us on Charon, which at the time was thought to be a moon of Pluto.
And instead of the Viet Cong, the enemy is barely in this story. We'll get to that.
The premise is the Elite Conscription Act. In this future, the army doesn't draft the poor or the uneducated.
No, it's the opposite. They draft the intellectual and physical elite. You have to have an IQ over 150 just to get drafted.
Which is such a fascinating inversion. Usually we think of the grunt as someone expendable, but here they are taking the absolute best and brightest physicists, biologists, artists, engineers, and turning them into foot soldiers.
And that's the satire. That's the commentary. It highlights the incredible waste of war. You take a genius who could cure cancer, you hand him a laser rifle, and you tell him to go dig a hole. It doesn't matter how smart he is. He's just meat for the military machine.
The story focuses almost entirely on the training. They aren't even fighting the aliens yet, the Taurans. They're just trying to survive the training environment.
And the environment on Charon is just unbelievably brutal.
It's near absolute zero. The sun is just a bright star in the sky. It provides no warmth. And this is where we have to talk about the physics, because Haldeman is a hard sci-fi writer. He cares about the details.
And those details are what make it so terrifying. The heat exchanger fin is a detail that gave me nightmares.
Me too. It's such a brilliant, specific, and plausible danger.
So the soldiers wear these advanced powered fighting suits. The suits keep you warm, obviously, in the near absolute zero cold. But basic thermodynamics says that heat has to go somewhere.
Right, you can't just keep generating heat inside a sealed system. You'd cook yourself.
So the suits have these large fins on the back that glow red hot, and they radiate the waste heat out into the vacuum of space.
So the fins are incredibly hot, hundreds of degrees. And the ground, the rocks on Charon, they're frozen gas methane ice, hydrogen ice.
Right, so what happens if you slip? Or if you just lean back against a rock of frozen gas?
The hot fin touches the ice.
The ice doesn't melt, it sublimes. It turns instantly from a solid to a gas. It expands explosively.
As the drill sergeant in the story says, it's the equivalent of a hand grenade going off right below your neck.
Think about the absurdity of that. You are wearing $1 million piece of technology. You are a certified genius with a PhD in astrophysics. And if you lean against the wrong rock, you blow your own head off.
It just perfectly emphasizes how fragile they are, even with all this tech, and how the technology itself controls them, rather than the other way around.
There's also the element of time dilation. We have to touch on this because it's so central to the Forever War concept.
The collapsor jumps.
Right. To travel between stars, they don't have faster than light drive. They use collapsers, what we call black holes. They dive into the gravity well to shoot across the galaxy in an instant.
But according to Einstein's theory of relativity, when you travel near the speed of light or near a massive gravity well, time slows down for you relative to the rest of the universe.
So the soldiers, from their perspective, might be on a military campaign for 2 months, subjective time.
But when they come back to Earth,
10 years have passed, or 20 years, or later in the book, centuries.
that is the ultimate alienation. We talk about soldiers coming home from war and feeling like they don't fit in anymore.
Haldeman takes that metaphor and makes it literal physics.
They come home, and everyone they ever knew is dead. The language has changed. The culture is completely different. There are literally ghosts from the past.
It's heartbreaking. It means they can never really go home. The only place they belong anymore is in the army, with the other people who are also out of time. It traps them in the war forever.
In Hero, the story we're focused on, we really see the brutality of the training itself. There's a scene involving a recruit named Bovanovich.
The digging exercise. They're using their high-powered finger lasers to dig bunkers in the ice. Bovanovich is down in a hole she's digging. A small rock slide traps her leg.
And there's a timed nuclear charge at the bottom of the hole set to go off. It's part of the quote-unquote realistic training.
The sergeant, a man named Cortez, is on the radio with her. And he isn't panicking. He's cold. He's completely detached, calculating. He tells her to wiggle her leg out. She can't. She's stuck. She starts to panic.
And his last words to her are, "Run, girl. You better run." But she can't. She doesn't make it. The charge goes off.
And the description, Haldeman does not look away. He forces you to see it.
Headless bodies spun off, trailing a red-black spiral of flash-frozen blood.
That image, flash-frozen blood, because it's so cold, the blood freezes solid before it can even hit the ground. It crystallizes in this horrific spiral. It's described with the cold precision of a physicist, not a poet.
It just strips any possible glory away from death in an instant.
And the reaction from the rest of the camp?
Nothing. Silence. No patriotic speech. No lesson learned. Just trauma. They just drag the body away and get back to training.
That's the Vietnam experience coming through. Death wasn't a meaningful plot point. It was just a random, absurd waste.
The climax of the story is so interesting because it isn't a battle with the enemy. They never even see an alien.
No, the climax is an engineering problem.
Right. Another soldier, a guy named Singer, falls and damages his heat exchanger fins. They get binge shot.
So now he has the opposite problem. His suit can't dump its waste heat.
But, and this is the cruel irony, the suit has a safety mechanism that kicks in and cuts the power to all systems to prevent him from cooking to death.
So now with the power off, he's freezing to death.
He's lying on the ground, inside a $1 million suit turning into a block of ice. And they can't just open his suit to get him out because it's a vacuum outside. He'd die instantly.
So Mandela, our protagonist, and the others, they have to improvise. They have to use their engineering skills. They build a makeshift coffin out of plastic sheets. They seal it with heating tape, and they use their own air tanks to pressurize it.
They have to build a tiny temporary atmosphere on the surface of Pluto in about 5 minutes, or their friend will die.
And Mandela has to get inside this plastic bag with Singer. He has to strip naked in near absolute zero conditions to get Singer out of the broken suit and into a spare one.
It's a scene of desperate, messy, clumsy intimacy. It's not glorious at all. It's two naked men in a plastic bag, shivering, terrified, trying not to die of exposure and frostbite.
At the end of it, Mandela ends up having to spoon with his male bunkmate just to share body heat so they don't freeze, and he's just crying because he's so exhausted and traumatized.
That is the hero of the title. The heroism isn't slaying the dragon or shooting the alien.
The heroism is enduring the misery. It's using your brain to solve a physics problem, to keep your buddy from freezing to death because of a bent piece of metal.
So when we look at these three stories together, Among Thieves, Second Variety, and Hero, what we get is this incredibly complex spectrum of what military fiction can be.
It really does cover the bases. Among Thieves gives us the political why. Why do we fight? To protect the center, to be the shield.
Second Variety gives us the existential what if. What if the tools of war take over?
And Hero gives us the physical how. How does it actually feel to be the tool? What is the miserable day-to-day reality?
And in all three of them, the traditional enemy is almost irrelevant.
That is the key insight, I think, for the whole deep dive today. In Among Thieves, the Koresh are barely characters. They're a force of nature. The real conflict is between Rush and his own conscience, his own people.
In Second Variety, the Soviets are a footnote. They're gone by the end. The enemy is our own creation, our own runaway technology.
And in Hero, we never even see a Toron. The enemy is the cold. The enemy is the suit. The enemy is the drill sergeant. The enemy is the training itself.
It all circles back to what Turtledove said in the introduction. If fiction is about character under stress, then the enemy is just the mechanism that provides the stress.
The real antagonist is the condition of war itself.
War is the antagonist. It forces Rush to become a monster to save civilization. It forces the Claws to evolve past their creators. It forces Private Mandela to strip away every shred of his dignity just to survive another day of training.
It's a huge shift from the early 20th century sci-fi, isn't it? What some people call the competence porn era of John Campbell's astounding magazine.
Right. Back in the 1940s, a lot of stories were very simple. We have a problem, our brilliant engineer invents a ray gun, we kill the bug-eyed monsters, hooray for humanity.
But after World War II, after the atom bomb, after Korea, and especially after Vietnam, the question shifted. The writers in this collection, they weren't asking, can we win?
They were asking, what do we lose by winning?
Exactly. What is the price of victory? Rush wins, but loses his soul. The UN wins against the Soviets, but loses the planet to its own machines. Mandela wins his training exercise, but loses his innocence and his place in time.
It's a sobering collection of stories. There are no easy answers here.
No, but I think that's why it's a necessary one. We need to look at the Medusa, as they say, even if it threatens to turn us to stone.
Well, on that heavy but very necessary note, I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about.
I suspect they'll be thinking about those heat exchanger fins for a while. I know I will be.
A final provocative thought, then, to leave you with. In all three of these stories, the enemy, as we said, is almost secondary. The Kolresh are a tool for Russia's plan. The Claws are our own creation. The Taurans are a complete unknown. So if military fiction is about character under stress, is the true antagonist of war, always. Just the war itself.
Something to think about.
Keep your shields up, everyone. And maybe watch out for the teddy bears. Until the next deep dive.